It had been destroyed multiple times over the years in many, many epic beer battles over the centuries, and it was rebuilt. rebuilt and
I like beer battles. It's very almost like creamy in a sense. I can feel it, my friend. It's like the force. It's calling you.
Welcome back to Beer Brackets, everybody. Today we are reviewing a Trappist beer that has been mentioned on the channel before in a past Beer Bracket of the Month episode, but we have not gotten to it in the purest form of beer conversation, that is a Beer Brackets beer review. We have not gotten to it yet. From what I know, you haven't tried this beer yet, right?
I have not, my friend, and I am super excited.
That always makes for the best reviews when it's a beer that we haven't tried yet, because you get our honest and open reactions to the beer. We just discovered, doing our beer research before starting to film this review, this monastery, the Notre-Dame d'Orval, or the previous monastery, the predecessor to it, existed back in like the year 1000, right? Some odd around there. It had been destroyed multiple times over the years in many, many epic beer battles over the centuries, and it was rebuilt. rebuilt and
I like beer battles. That's wonderful.
So many battles fought over beer, my friend. Especially the monasteries. They seem to get destroyed left and right for some reason. People did not like those monks brewing beer, but it was rebuilt over and over and over again. This latest reincarnation of it was rebuilt back in the 1910s, and oh my God, is this an interesting beer. If you are involved in the beer world at all, if you are a beer enthusiast, a connoisseur, you have heard about Orval. You have heard other beers compared to Orval. My friend, before we started filming, you mentioned the Matilda by Goose Island being inspired by Orval. This is a unique beer. Oh my God. And what gives it its uniqueness, or at least part of it, is a certain wild yeast, right?
Yeah, you're correct, my friend. Brettanomyces, or
wild,
as people call it also sometimes, Brett. All it is like it's one of the wild yeasts that exists like in the air, in the wood, and that is not one of them, the two main strains of yeast that are used in lager and ale, but
it's in the wood.
Yeah, it's just around you. It's like the force.
I have to ask you, our beautiful wood beer bracket signs, do you think there's a wild yeast that exists within the wood of our beer bracket signs?
I can feel it, my friend. It's like the force. It's calling you. It's all around you.
It's just bursting with wild yeast. Super interesting, because obviously we're going to see throughout the review how unique this beer is. But we can't give up. We can't pass on a good beer legend. And you happen to know about the legend that is the story behind the logo here. The little fish with the gold ring in its mouth, correct?
I actually do. There was this countess from Tuscany in Italy and if I'm not mistaken, her name was Matilda, and I think that might have like some inspiration for another beer, right? Like that
you just unlocked a beer mystery. I never put two and two together and realized that.
I think, but I'm not 100% sure, so we might have to double check on that. But this countess coming from Italy, from Tuscany, was visiting this beautiful valley, the Golden Valley, Orval, right? Like she was there, and she happened to be walking around and losing her golden ring in a lake. And she was incredibly attached to this.
Hold on to your ring.
Yeah, she just lost it. And so at that point, like, obviously the only thing she could think of doing was like, she asked God like to please get that ring back. And she,
of course, as one does,
she promised that if she would get somehow that ring back, she would finance and found an abbey there in this beautiful valley. So the legend says that at that point in time, like a trout came out of the water holding her golden ring in its mouth. And that's where the logo comes from.
I wonder if she'd been drinking with the monks at this monastery before discovering this trout with the golden ring.
It's always a possibility. It's a thin line that we never know that it has been crossed or not.
It's a thin line. Oh, Matilda. And as usual with these Trappist monasteries, all the money from the sale of this particular beer does go back into the monastery itself or into local charities or good and positive endeavors to do with the community there in Orval, Belgium. So go buy some Orval. Support the wizards. My friend, yes. Let's crack this open and let's get to it, because man, we've been waiting way too long.
Oh yes, I'm so excited for this. You don't even know.
You don't even know. It smells like straight out of the bottle. It smells like a bouquet of flowers. Okay. I don't have an Orval glass, and I'll put a picture of an Orval glass up here. They're known for like their really cool glasses that are really sort of like very circular like this, but they look kind of like half a UFO. And so instead I have my St. Bernardus Watteau glass because I think this is probably the closest that I can get to the circular Orval glass without having one.
That's fair.
So my friend, let's pour these out.
Cheers.
And let's see what we're dealing with.
Look at that.
Oh, that is... Okay, I got a big head on mine, but you can see kind of underneath how dark that is and like the caramel colors. Yeah, you got that giant head too. Look at that.
Wow.
Yeah, this beer is carbonated, to say the least. But that caramelly color. All right, man. Aroma cheers.
Aroma cheers.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, yeah. I can tell this has Brettanomyces. Like we were discussing a little bit before the review about Brettanomyces in general, and in the wine world is pretty. It's a descriptor that is used, and I don't know if it's because I've smelled it before, but it has a very, very distinct flavor. Like some people describe it as horse saddle leather. I can pick it up pretty precisely. And I kind of like it. I like it a lot. It has almost like a herbal note, almost like sage.
Yeah.
And I can see the floral, like it's almost like this wine-like character. Floral is a good term, but for me, I think like sage and that like leathery component are the two main things, with maybe a little bit of orange, citrus of some sort. Man, like I can keep smelling this and going on for hours. This is a 3 on 3. I love it.
Giving it a 3?
I absolutely love this.
Yeah, I think your descriptors are perfect. I think, some kind of herbal spice like a sage or like a rosemary. And you know what? That's interesting that you mentioned like a leathery sense, because I never sort of put two and two together. The first time that I had Orval was on that Beer Bracket of the Month episode, and all I got was floral. But now you're right. It's kind of like an herbalness mixed with like a leatheriness, almost like a peaty scotch kind of mixed together in one. That gives it like this amazing funkiness. And I think that word funky is going to come up a lot in this review. It's interesting. It's unique. It's like nothing I've ever smelled before in a beer. It's not quite, I'm reserving a 3 for something that's really making me want to go in and take a sip because it smells really delicious. This is like piquing my curiosity, so it's making me want to go in and take a sip. So I think it's like a 2.5 I'll go with. But now, my friend, now you get to taste the Orval for the first time. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, my friend.
Enjoy. Let me know what you think.
Thank you.
I'll do a zoom in on your face right here so we can get a full Alessandro reaction.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I can see your reaction.
Yeah, this is... Wow. Oh, and it keeps going, but that's getting into the finish. I gotta be...
It keeps going, right? It keeps going.
Where to start? I mean, it has a very sharp acidity. I wouldn't have expected, combined with a very clean bitterness. It's hoppy, but it's also not only like I think it's the Brettanomyces, that kind of yeast that they use. I believe they use it in the secondary fermentation. Whatever it is, like that leathery character, that's how I best can describe it, goes throughout the whole tasting experience. I understand that this is a very much like either you like it or you don't, or you're maybe a little curious about it. But it's a flavor that I find very rarely and I love. So for me, this is a 3 on 3 because it starts with that very subtle bitterness and acidity, and then turns into this very strong leather, subtle with a little bit of sweetness, but it's mostly like bitter acidic, which is like insane. I love it.
I've been waiting months since I discovered Orval to hear what you thought about this beer. So far it's a perfect beer for you. It can't be a beer bracket perfect beer because so far I've given it a 2.5 to open up with. So it's not perfect, but it might be an Alessandro perfect beer. Dude, you know what? I think I have compared a beer to focaccia before.
Yeah. I think was it the Hofbrau? I think
it was the Hofbrau. I think you are familiar, or I would assume you're familiar with a Tarale.
Yeah, Tarale. Yeah, of course.
Tarale, right? So that little, it's like an Italian sort of almost like a cracker that you bake, and it's normally in like a ribbon shape.
Yeah, of
and
course.
It's got some spices built into it. It's like, I don't know exactly off the top of my head what spice. I'm assuming it's like a rosemary, sage, and there's
they use also with fennel seeds sometimes.
Fennel seeds, yes. The Finoc.
Yes.
I would compare this to a Tarale. Like, I think it's a Tarale beer because it's got sort of like the breadiness that the baseline maltiness, but also there's that sort of herbal spiciness along with it too, and a little bit of funkiness that you get from the fennel seeds. So fennel seeds, if you're not familiar with fennel, it's very, very popular. It's in Italian cooking, it's used a lot, but even just eating the vegetable, which is what's it called? Is it fennel?
Fennel, I think.
Eating fennel in itself is kind of it's very popular in Italian culture, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
But fennel has like kind of its black licorice, but there's a little bit of funkiness to it there. So I would associate this with Tarale. It's really good. It's really good, and there's like a strong hop bitterness there that just sort of blankets everything. So you get a little bit of floral, a little bit of funkiness, a little bit of hops. Is this something I would necessarily seek out as a taste? Yes and no. So I think I'm going to stick with my 2.5 rating so far, because I think it's close to being like, it's obviously masterfully made, but to my own personal taste, it's not quite a 3. But now, my friend, we get onto the mouthfeel. And so we got to do Beer Bracket Tradition Refresher.
There we go.
Pour out that beer, man. Pour out that beautiful, funky Tarale beer.
I like that descriptor of the Tarale. I can definitely see the fennel seed. I don't know, like for me, it has this, and I just wanted to add this before we jump into mouthfeel. Have you ever had, like, that's a big thing in Italy, like those sage leaves that have been fried. That's a I've
never had that, but I can picture what that would taste like, but I've never had it.
And it has this breading, so they're just like, flour and eggs, like, and then they're just fried. Like that sage, it has that almost like that bitterness, but also like slight herbal spiciness. So like the more I think about it, to me, like it connects to that. Like, and it's but the fennel seed is also a great descriptor. So
this beer's got a good mouthfeel.
One of the things that surprises me is that, like, for how light and how carbonated it is, it doesn't have like that classic million bubbles bursting. It's very almost like creamy in a sense, right?
Yeah.
It's light. It's crisp. The crispiness I would associate a little bit more with the bitterness that comes from it and the acidity. It is quite interesting, but so far the only flaw I find, like, it's that for how carbonated it is, I would almost expect like a little bit more of that bubble presence, which is probably like just, again, like a personal preference. So here I think I'm going to go with the 2.5 since we have the option. What do you think, my friend?
We do have that option. I know what you mean. Like, if you think about like a beer like an ABT 12 that is really highly carbonated, but it's a sharp carbonation. It's almost like drinking you pop open a can of carbonated water like a LaCroix or something like that,
exactly.
right? You get that sharp hit of carbonation. That's something that you get on some beers. This is very carbonated, but you don't get that sharp hit. It's much more subtle, like you said, creamy, which is really nice. But it loses a little bit of the effect of the carbonation on that. But it's interesting. It makes it really drinkable, I find. Like, it makes it really easy to sort of, because the flavors are so strong, because it's so unique in that way, and everything is very sort of, the flavors are very spiky. I mean, like, I think like the smooth carbonation, the smooth mouthfeel helps with the drinkability of it. Is it a 3 mouthfeel? I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say there's anything too unique there. I'm gonna go with a 2. The carbonation is just sort of like, if you stick your hand into soapy water, I know this might seem like a strange comparison, but you know how like it's just very soft bubbles?
Yeah.
And you almost don't feel the bubbles when you stick your hand in? So, my friend, the finish, because the finish on this beer, I think, it's still evolving for me from the first sip. So, oh, by the way, one thing I didn't mention that could factor into the finish, because this beer is bottle fermented, they do say on the website that depending on how long you age it for, the beer does change. So that's something to keep in mind. I think if you have a fresh Orval or one that's been sitting around for a little bit, there might be a little bit of a difference there.
I mean, the finish is, and I like, in the taste, like I was almost like tempted to start describing the finish, because it just, normally with the beer, you wait a moment and you have some elements, but then, they kind of fade away pretty quickly to some extent. In this beer, like they just keep going. Like, I mean, I've taken a sip at this point, like probably 5 seconds ago, and I can still taste new things.
Yeah.
And they're different, and they're complex, and they're subtle, and they're small nuances that are, you know, like in this sense, I would say that it resembles more like a red wine, where like it lingers and it stays around for quite a while, right? Like you taste elements that, or you have aromas that are coming up. You know, a little bit of that leather. I still go back to that sage for me. That's what like connects it. And then like you have a little bit of that acidity. I attribute that like to, you know, or associate that with oranges. And then like it keeps going and it changes. Then that leather coming again. 3 on 3 here, man. Like I love complex finishes. And this, like I wish I had a few like aged so we could try a comparison of different, you know, vintages almost.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do that.
Maybe we should. That'd be a really cool video. I gotta take another sip. I don't even know how to begin to describe the finish of this beer. It's too complex for me. Like it's too complex for words for me. It's amazing. It evolves over time like you wouldn't believe. After you take a sip, like you said, 5, 10, 15 seconds later, it's still changing. Like right away, like those spices, sage, fennel seed, whatever kind of herbal spice you want to associate. Then there's like a maltiness that I get, a very like strong breadiness. Then the hops come in, and then they all kind of mix together into a beautiful terale, and just tied together in a beautiful bow in a little gift package. And it's beautiful, man. It's delicious. This is a 3 on 3 finish. It gets its first 3 for me. This beer is all about the finish for me. So now, my friend, is an overall beer experience. This is, as we like to say, where the intangibles come into play. How would you rate Orval?
It's been an amazing tasting experience. Really,
it's been an amazing beer journey.
It has, because I had never experienced this before, and surprisingly, like, you know, it's a beer that it's well known, but for whatever reason, like I never got to taste it before, which is exciting because I got to experience here with you tonight. So I'm very happy about that.
Me too.
And for me, and I think it comes down to 2 elements here, like that I particularly pinpointed, like, and one is that like that Brettanomyces, like I associate that mostly with leather bitterness, the sage, those 2, and the way they play with the finish. But this is a 3 on 3 beer experience for me. Like it's I love how all of those elements are playing. The mouthfeel really, like, for me was like a little bit short, but if it wasn't for that, like this was like very close to a perfect beer. How about you, my friend?
Yeah, the mouthfeel is where it kind of fell short for me too. It got its only 2. I think as an overall beer experience from beginning to end, this is definitely a 3 on 3 for me too. There's no doubt about that. It's unique. It's extremely interesting. I think no matter what your tastes are, there's something for everybody in this. I would think.
Yeah.
You know, if you're into very hoppy beers, let's say like IPAs, there's enough hop here, there's enough interesting bitterness to it that I think you could get something out of it. If you're into really malty beers like lagers and ales, I think there's something you can get out of this too in terms of the body and the taste and the aroma. If you're into things that are a little funkier, if you're into sour beers, if you're into lambics, if you're into whatever it is, I think there's something that you can get from this too. A little bit of something for everybody. And if you're somebody who appreciates all these different styles like Alessandro and I are, then this is kind of like a nice little beer buffet, and you get a little bit of everything. And I think that's a beautiful thing, and this is a wonderful beer. All right, tallying up our final scores for me, that came out to a 4.33 on 5, which is a really high score in beer brackets world, and that comes out to an outstanding beer in our beer rating system. And for Alessandro, it's a little higher, 4.83. It came close. It almost hit that perfect beer level for you, my friend. 4.83 on 5, which is still an outstanding beer. Oh my. Cheers, buddy. This was a pleasure. This was a pleasure in beer tasting.
Likewise.
I'm really happy I got to experience this with you having it for the first time. Cheers, everybody. Let us know what you think down below. If you had Orval before, what do you think about it? I know this beer is kind of like a little divisive. Some people aren't too crazy about it. I've seen a lot of reviews out there where they weren't like, it's not my thing. Let us know what you think down below. If you have had it, is it to your taste or not? Do not forget to close your beer brackets. Open and close your Trappist beer brackets.
Never forget. The wizard will know.
The wizards, they will always know.
They will.
They will always know. Go back and watch our Halloween episode. You'll see.
They're looking.
You'll see.